Well, I'm joined now by our World Affairs commentator, Doug Herbert. Hi,
a lot going on
Doug.
there, Angela, today.
The dynamic of this war, Russia and Ukraine exchanging volleys of drones, Russia at times sending hundreds of drones and missiles in a bid to overwhelm Ukraine's air defences. Tell us more.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And once again, I do this quite often. I say factually that is correct, that both sides have been launching volleys in Ukraine's case of drones, in Russia's case of drones and missiles, these barrages of attacks on each other. And we've really seen, in July in particular, sort of a steady uptick in the number of these back and forth volleys between Russia and Ukraine of projectiles fired from the other's territory into the other's territory. And you rightly said that in the most recent one, it was 126 Ukrainian drones. And more sort of rarely, the Russian drone attack was actually lesser numerically overnight than the Ukrainian drone attack. However, the general pattern, and this is what I think we have to look at, if you go back over the past 2.5 months, since May, there has been a steady uptick in the number of Russian drones and missiles fired into Ukraine. So what I mean is I am not doing, on the one hand, Russia's fired this, on the other hand, Ukraine's fired this. Scale and scope and breadth, Russia's attacks have far outnumbered, also in damage and devastation caused on Ukrainian territory, what Ukraine has returned and fired into Russia. Numerically, what's interesting is that we have seen the number of drones and missiles spiking really in recent weeks. In the first half of July alone, Ukraine's military has reported, independent media sources have confirmed these numbers, as much as you can confirm anything in the fog of war, that Ukraine has reported 4,067 drone strikes from Russia into its territory. 2 days ago, we had a lot of those drones. The latest big barrage was targeting energy infrastructure throughout Ukraine, in northern Ukraine, in central Ukraine, in southern Ukraine, really across the country, sending a message, nowhere was really safe. Now, Russia's saying purely energy infrastructure. Ukraine maintains that a lot of this is civilian infrastructure. Civilian targets are time and again hit, even as Russia vehemently denies that it targets civilian infrastructure, whether we're talking about schools or homes or residences or hospitals, the list goes on. So once again, the pattern is, yes, barrages of drone attacks by both sides against the other side's territory, but on one side using far greater in both number and potential devastation, because Russia also has those hypersonic missiles that Ukraine is lacking to fire at Ukraine. That is what we're seeing in these drone barrages. And it does amount to the word that's been used in Russia's case. Ukrainian officials describe it as an aerial terror war. The aim really to be, on Russia's part, if you ask Ukrainian officials, to essentially strike hard into the fears of the Ukrainian population, to undermine both them and the morale of the army, and to really sow terror among the population everywhere. It's a war of attrition. If Russia can't advance well on the battlefield, it's doing so very much in the air through this sort of disproportionate drone and missile strike.
No sign, then, certainly, of them going to the negotiating table.
Zero sign. Zero.
After Trump's call on Monday for that. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, we do have developments. We have a new government, a reshuffle. So tell us what you can about that.
Well, we have a new prime minister, and that obviously brings in the domino effect of other reshuffling below her. So Yulia Sviridenko is right now stepping into a post. She has been the deputy prime minister for 4 years now. She's an economist. And what she's really being called on to do by Zelensky is to more prioritize a hard focus on the relationship now with Washington. As we said at a difficult time when Ukraine is trying to really, really press its case with Donald Trump, who's blown hot and cold with regards to Ukraine lately, has seemingly been leaning a little bit more towards Ukraine. So her priorities right now, as she puts it, on the domestic front, are making sure that the Ukrainian army is reliably supplied at a time when supplies have been hard to come by. She also has announced that Ukraine is she wants to step up domestic weapons production within Ukraine. Ukraine now produces about 40% of its own weapons production. The rest is is imported from outside the country, its allies, it wants to bring it up to about 50% in the next few years. So that's a heavy lift, too, a tall order. But also Ukraine, it's been talked about a lot, the corruption, the misappropriation of funds. She's going to be doing a full audit of public finances, and she wants to really find economies and free up cash by tackling corruption that could be used, obviously, brought to the war effort and brought to perhaps the rearming a lot of Ukraine's army. So these are her main efforts. There's also going to be a new ambassador to Washington, once again replacing an old Ukrainian ambassador to Washington who had gotten on the bad side, to say the least, of the Trump administration in past years. So right now you have a lot of prioritization more in favor of that relationship, that hard focus on keeping the U.S. on side, that is, on Ukraine's side.
Okay, thanks, Doug. We'll have to leave it there. Doug Herbert, as usual, there with his analysis.